Uh, Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Yashwan from MIT School of Film and Television. Welcome to our webinar on visual effects and computer graphics. It basically is digital animation. We have with us renowned visual effects specialist, Mr. Shri Vivek Suvarna, and with him our co-speaker is Mr. Beju Kurup, Professor Beju Kurup, who is the head of visual effects, animation, and editing at MIT School of Film and Television. Most of you must have enrolled in for admission to MIT School of Film and Television. We have, as you know, we have two courses. One is BSc in filmmaking, and the second one is MSc in filmmaking. The BSc in filmmaking is specializations are direction and screenplay writing, sound recording and design, cinematography, editing, and visual effects. Also, the MSc in filmmaking have the same specialization. In the first year for BSc in filmmaking, you do basics of all specialization, and from the second year you start your specialization. For MSc in the first semester, you do all basics of all specialization, and from the second semester you start the specialization. Our college is university, and the college is opening for the new session on 1st of September. It will be a combination of online as well as on-campus education for the present. Okay, so now Professor Beju Kurup will introduce you to the program of today. Beju sir, you can go ahead now.
Yeah, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our section. And I just give you an introduction, description about what this webinar all about. So this webinar is actually one among the webinar series School of Film and Television Planning in this academic year in association with the Media Lab. And Media Lab is the experimental center for contemporary thoughts and idea related to new forms of expression and storytelling under the edit and VFX department. So this is what actually I want to talk in the beginning. I mean, we are developing a center which is right now I actually mentioned about it, which is called Media Lab, and this is actually something we are offering to our students as well as the people, the professionals, filmmakers, and artists across the globe. I mean, all of you can actually join with us in the Media Lab, and because we all know that today's world is an increasingly visual one with the web, video games, movies, TV, different digital platforms delivering with n number of content. Therefore, the present demand is for deeper involvement and experiencing the fiction or fictional element. Right now, and in short, probably we'll be able to put it this way: we are living in harmony with surplus visuals. Okay, we do not know what are the different kinds, and I mean, knowingly, unknowingly, we consume lots of visuals every day, and along with that, content. I mean, different kinds of content. In the advanced time of digital filmmaking, I mean, the notion of mise-en-scene, again, little theoretical term, but many of you are very familiar with this. The relation between the and the character became more imaginary by including a notion of space that has no physical, material, or logistical limitations. And so right now, the digital filmmaking actually giving lots of power to create a new space. I mean, the space which is actually not created during the time of shoot. So these are the new possibilities people started already exploring, and there are lots of interesting output out of that. In this context, especially, the visual effect has a significant role to create the real, and which would have been very expensive. Okay, that is most important point about one of the uh, practical and logical use of visual effects in filmmaking, or simply impossible to capture on film. I mean, there are so many things, I mean, which is quite impossible. Visual effects using computer generated imagery, which have actually became increasingly common in all kinds of fields. Okay. I mean, films, games, commercials, television, and whatnot. It is there everywhere in short. That's what I would say. By considering this as well as the current requirement of the industry, MIT SFT included a new digital environment into the present curriculum of cinematic storytelling. Okay, that is one thing which we are offering to our students, and we keep upgrading ourselves with latest technology. And we are also actually increasing our strength in terms of increasing the different discipline. And since we are offering the collaborative uh, learning process, the different disciplines are we definitely going to complement with each other, and definitely the students will get more input than any other film school. And I can definitely say probably this is the only one of the, I mean, only probably only one film school at present in India where we teach transmedia 360 cinema along with cinematic form of storytelling. I mean, you have established film school, but they do not teach transmedia or any other new form of storytelling. So this is actually the advantage of we are having VFX plus we have the media center, which is actually upcoming, which is in the process of setting up and which will be functional in a very short period of time. Okay. So SFT is also planning various activities associated with Media Lab for this academic year. Roughly, we have divided this into three phases. Phase one, with a series of webinar on various topics related with arts and visual culture. For that, we are forming a forum for studies. Okay, this forum will be open to all. Okay, that is what the phase we are at the moment. Okay, we'll be opening up this forum to everyone. I mean, people from all the fields and people with different professions and even aspiring students, etc. Then we will be moving to the second phase. Phase two will focus on research and workshop with professionals. Okay, that actually will happen in the phase two, which is a later stage, and phase three will be project-based production in new forms of storytelling, and we are planning to actually materialize all these phases in this academic year. That is what we are into right now. And this is actually one of this webinar, which is an introduction to our activities related with the media lab. Okay, so I mean you are all aware of the title we have given to the present topic, and reprinting digital creatures, a filmmaker's guide for conjuring believable CG animals on the screen. And in this, Vivek anyway going to start very soon, and he will be elaborating the different topics which he included in the subject, and which is very relevant in many ways. And not many people have a deeper knowledge in this area. And of course, we all enjoyed watching animals on the screen, either they are really short, or they are live, or computer graphically created. But the process behind it and the tricks, the technology is something still not very transparent as well as clear to people. I mean, at the same time, I'm not ignoring the fact that some of you must have flipped through the different making videos, which shows how the green screen is used and etc. etc. But still, that those videos are not capable to talk in detail about the creation of animals and the difficult part of it and how difficult it is to create an animal. It's also vary from animal to animal, and also those kind of videos will never ever talk about the bondage between the animal and the human in the film according to the narrative. Okay, I now move to uh, given in the move to before actually handing it over to Vivek to start his section. I think I'm in a slightly given introduction about Vivek. Vivek is a very familiar person to all of us. I mean, he started associating with us in 2018, He did a workshop in PIF, and the workshop was on 360 film, the possibility and the language of 360 cinema, which was highly appreciated by that. Subsequently, he visited our school and did another interesting workshop on film, on color theory and coloring of the film, and which was 5 days long workshop. I'm very sure that was one of the best workshop we did in that year, I mean 2018. Vivek is a creative director and VFX supervisor at L'Academie, the company he owns. He is alumni of Academy of Art University San Francisco, where he studied animation and visual effects. He has worked on numerous TV commercials, music videos, and independent films in both India and abroad, and was nominated for Best Title Design at Cg Technical Awards for Excellence in Digital Filmmaking in the year 2004. He is currently developing an in-house full CG shot and also serving as a creative advisor for an American educational startup focusing on immersive media for special needs kids. Also a regular participant at many international seminars, which definitely going to reflect in his talk. And yeah, one more thing, and he's also a member in our syllabus committee, and he has been doing guest lecture series with us for our VFX student. And that's all I got to talk to you as introduction to this particular seminar, and in between probably we can develop what all we want to interact with each other, and I'll also add what all flash across in my head. Let me check it out with Vivek. If he's ready, probably we can start with the section. Otherwise, I mean, uh, Vivek.
Hi, quick sound check. Can you hear me and can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Audio, video, all good?
Yeah, it's clear. The image is on the screen.
Okay, great.
You're
And Baiju, do you want to talk about muting the video if that helps the quality?
Yeah. There is a request, and all the participants, please mute the video. Mute the video. Mute the audio. So.
Okay, all good?
Just to avoid the disturbance while we were talking and all that. So if all of you mute the audio, then all of you can, as well as all the participants, can completely focus on the lecture. That's why I requested all of you to kindly mute the audio.
Okay.
Yeah.
All good? Should I start?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So, yeah, sorry about the mute video and mute audio thing. It's supposedly has a technical benefit that the videos that I'll be showing will get better bandwidth and you'll be able to see it in better quality. So that's something we were hoping would be working. And yeah, first of all, thank you to each and every one of you for coming here. It's a Friday afternoon. I know there are many other things you might be busy with. So I really appreciate, you taking the time out of your schedule to be here. Let me begin. So like Baiju gave me a very flattering introduction. I was just going to say something similar, that I work as a creative director and a VFX supervisor at a company named L'Academie that me and a producer friend of mine started together. It's a 5-year-old company and we work on visual effects and motion design for TV commercials and feature films. And like Baiju said, so I studied in Academy of Art in San Francisco. I was there for around 5 years. I worked there on commercials and music videos, 2 American films, and after that I've been in India. Let me see, let's move on. So to continue where Baiju picked up about the relationship of animals and humans, uh, animals have been a part of our storytelling tradition of all humans, not talking about Indians in general, but the entire human civilization. Animals have always been a part of um our storytelling culture for many years, and if and they've always represented something. So if you think about the early days before civilization, when humans used to live in the wild and they used to live um, basically cavemen, they would sit around a campfire and perhaps share stories. Uh, and the oral tradition of storytelling started that way. And in those stories, you might have heard of stories where a character or a hero or a protagonist faces his fear and defeats it, usually in the form of a wild animal like a lion or a tiger, which is an apex predator. So, so in that case, the wild animal represents fear, and overcoming that fear is a heroic moment. And as we moved on towards civilization, our society became safer because we have strength in numbers, and animals are less likely to enter a crowded environment. So the stories started changing. So from slaying lions and tigers, we went towards slaying dragons, perhaps, or other mythical creatures. If you look at ancient Greek mythology, there's a plethora of wonderful creatures that you can learn about. And let me see. And this continues in film as a storytelling tradition. I have a clip of the 1954 Godzilla, and this film has a interesting backstory to it. This was made few years after the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing, and the only reason this film was made was because the director was so moved by the tragedy. He wanted to capture the shock and disturbance of his experience on film. And after World War II, Japan was occupied by the US, and there was very strict censorship about what you can talk about, what you can show, what you cannot show. So uh, instead of talking about a nuclear bomb that spreads radiation and destroys the town, they were able to use a creature that embodies this threat. And if you've seen the film, this is just a very short clip, that the monster is relentless in his attack. So this particular scene in the film goes on for maybe 15 or 20 minutes non-stop. And that's very intentional. They wanted to show that when the attack hits, it simply will not stop. And there is no way to stop it. That's what this monster represented. And this is a continuation of that tradition of, you have a monster which represents your fear and your anxieties, and mankind has to come together to fight it and overcome it. Now, this is one kind of creatures, but there can also be creatures who are lovable, who we care about, who especially connect with the inner child in us all, in that they take the form of a friend that accepts outcasts or loners or people who don't fit in without judgment. So if you've seen this film, that's somewhat the story of this little girl, that she doesn't fit in with the rest of her friends at school, and the only one who accepts her for who she is this little alien creature. And this is a similar theme that you'll see in a lot of films with creatures. This is from How to Train Your Dragon. If you've seen this film, you would know that this dragon also represents a very dangerous, fearsome creature. And this character finds a way to connect and, befriend this character with love, not violence. So, and let me see. There's also E.T., which I don't have a clip of right now, but I believe everyone has seen the film E.T. And the way you shoot a monster or a creature is very different. It's the two things are the filmmaking language used to bring them on screen is very different, and the personality of the creature or the role this creature plays in the film greatly influences the design choices which are made. So, like E.T., for example, there's a very delicate balance of an ugly alien and a cute, lovable friend, right? And character designers work very hard with directors and screenwriters to understand their intention to find the correct design. If you're not able to find the correct design, the character will not be memorable to the audience. And there might be, dozens of films with creatures, but the ones which will stick by your memory are the ones which truly portray the personality in the visual form. And these are things that I cover in my classes here, even before we ever start playing around in a 3D software. Even on the conceptual stages when we are learning about art, we discuss these things, and all our students are very familiar with these traditions of uh, how to build a right character for the film, not just any character. And so let me see. And the design choices are dependent on multiple things, whether it's a ruthless killing machine or does it have human qualities that you can relate to. And it can also be a real animal. Speaking of real animals, let me go back to how films were shot before, computer generated animals or CG animals were commonplace. These films were made, but far in between. Slowly, the number of such films is going up because the access to technology. But there's something of value here that I want filmmakers in the audience or students in the audience to take note of. Just because it's old doesn't mean it's not valuable. Mechanical animals, or animatronics as we call it, are a very good way for simple shots. When I say simple shots, in the sense where there is not a lot of movement and you're not expecting a performance from your creature. When I say performance, like a facial performance, you do not require your characters to have, very relatable emotions. In those cases, mechanical animals, I would say, is superior to digital VFX, even though, my bread and butter is in digital VFX. So let me show you some examples of that. Here's a baby seal that was used for a TV commercial. It looks absolutely real. And the wonderful thing about this is you build it once, right? It's expensive. It's not cheap, but you build it once and you can use this for any number of shots you want, right? Versus if you made this character digital, the animation costs and the rendering costs are billed by per shot basis. So if you have a lot of shots with very little facial performance, this is still an excellent way to do creatures, and your film shoot goes so much easier with mechanical animals because your actors can interact with it, they can see it, they can play with it, and the setup time is greatly reduced. And the most important thing which all VFX films struggle with is matching the environment of the set in the computer. So whatever is going on here on set, let's say this commercial was shot at 2 p.m. sunlight at a particular location. the VFX artists have to be able to recreate those lighting conditions and to simulate all the different interactions. For example, his knee is casting a shadow on this seal. Now, a simple thing like that would become a big challenge in digital work. So, there is still a lot of value to be seen in mechanical animals, and there are very few workshops who still build with mechanical animals, so it's getting harder to find. But let me show you one more example. Like this squirrel, it looks absolutely real and believable, and then you see the mechanics of it. This is how it was built. So if you have a little shot like this where the squirrel is just sniffing a nut, or it's trying to crack open a nut, it's fairly possible to do with animatronics. All you have to do is the little metal piece that is supporting the nut has to be digitally removed. Now let's move on to digital CG VFX animals, right? So we are going to categorize and subcategorize these creatures, and I'm doing it because I want filmmakers to think about these things when they are writing a story, or when they are building or updating their screenplays, so they have a very clear understanding of what different styles of animals and creatures are possible, and how to better communicate with your VFX supervisors. So this is a big problem that a lot of filmmakers face, or a lot of VFX supervisors face, is that they may be very good at their job, they may be very good at VFX, but they may not fully understand your vision because they're not from a filmmaking background. That's one more problem that MIT students have an advantage over, because they have to be in a filmmaking environment. They have to help out their friends on set to be a participant in the production. So there is no way out where they would not know how filmmakers think about these things. So it's really important to have a common ground in terms of technical language, or a cinematic language that you want to convey your ideas with. So this is an effort to help filmmakers and film students to take a step towards VFX. And obviously, when I do my classes with my VFX students, we always talk about the filmmaker's vision and what is right for the film. And it's not a matter of what is the latest, what is the best, what is right for the film, much like cinematography in a way. So let's divide all the creatures and all the animals and all the monsters into two basic categories for now. One is existing animals, wildlife or domestic, that you have seen and you have known and you have learned about. And other are fantasy creatures. So let me see if I have some examples. I think I have some examples here. Yeah. So if we start with real animals, there is simply no question, no doubt that what realism means, right? This is what we call a photoreal creature. And when you are dealing with real animals, this is the most common request that you will hear, that I want a photoreal creature. But with a photoreal creature, you have to understand it's not just photoreal in terms of the way it looks. It has to be photoreal in the way it behaves, right? So let's say if you want this kind of an animal, but you want more emotions and more performance out of it, then you will have to choose a different category, and I'll come to that in a second. So again, this is an example of photoreal animals. This is, I think, from the recent Tarzan movie. And for this film, it's supposed to be in the jungle. There is no fantasy element. There's no magic. There's no, wizards or anything. So an animal in the jungle has to look like a real animal. So that's why they've chosen a photoreal animal for this particular scene. I think my next example is fantasy. Okay, so here are fantasy creatures, which, come from the minds of brilliant writers, directors, and so on. And for fantasy, the discovery process, the process in which you arrive at the design is slightly longer, because you might have something in mind, but for it to appear on screen, it may not look the same. So there's a lot of back and forth between character designer and the director and the screenwriter, because it has to serve certain story beats, it has to perform certain tasks, and it also has to visually evoke certain emotions or certain feelings. For example, some of these characters are cute, some of these characters look dangerous, some of these characters look menacing, and that's all due to the work they've done in the character design stage, right? Okay, so now that we've got photoreal out of the way, now we'll explore this fantasy or imaginary creature a little more. So let's divide this imaginary creature into 3 more subcategories. Okay, so I want you to try to remember this little diagram. It's not even a diagram, but so on the right side is photoreal, for which the examples we saw, and the left side is cartoony, right? So we all know, we saw examples of photoreal and we have an idea of what cartoony characters look like, but right in the middle is something called stylized, and this is something that confuses a lot of creative people. When I say creative, like character designers, VFX artists, there's a lot of debate on the definition of stylized. So hopefully, we can come to some sort of an understanding of what that means. So let's start. Yeah, so we'll just go through Photoreal one more time. This is a film I believe all of you might have seen, Life of Pi. And again, the requirement of this was to be as photoreal as possible. And this is an example of a cartoony character, right? This looks like a cartoon. It just happens to be in a 3D form, right? The expressions and, the proportions and the style of fur that is used is not realistic at all. It's all designed to make it look soft, make it look cuddly, make it look like a toy, make it look like something you wish existed in real life. That's the goal. So this is cartoony. Now let's try to unpack what stylized could mean. So since the diagram suggests it's somewhere in the middle, that's what it is. It is, a little bit of photorealism, a little bit of stylized, but it's not as simple as that. There can be variations in that. So let's take a look at that. See, for example, this particular chameleon, it's built to be anatomically almost accurate, right? But they've made a lot of concessions in the way the bones and muscles are laid out, because the moves that this character is doing is simply not possible in real life. And also, if you notice very closely, its eyes and mouth shapes are slightly exaggerated, because they want you to read a certain emotional beat that he's doing while dancing, right? It's very, very subtle, but the more you do these things and more material you come across, or the more designs you go across, it'll be more apparent and be much more easier for you to decipher these things. And here's a popular film which lands smack in the middle, where the personality and the performance and the character design is all very cartoony, but at the same time, the characteristics of the fur is designed as per photorealistic traditions. So this bear, I think, just came out of the jungle. He brought back some oranges. So they've paid attention to, one second, let me try to pause on a close-up of him. So he just came back from the jungle with some oranges in the scene, and being a rainforest, there must be moisture in the air. So you can see his hair is slightly wet, slightly sticky. So they've paid attention to these things because it's a feature film, and this is somewhat of a style decision that the creative director and the art director and the film director take together. So this is an example of right smack in the middle. The chameleon was an example of more towards realistic, but personality was cartoony. And I'm sure this is a character all of you love. This is somewhat similar, but more towards cartoony. As in, the fur and, a lot of what do you call the anatomical features might be photoreal, but the personality and the movement and all these things are completely, cartoony. This character is designed to appeal to kids, and it has to have this effervescent personality for kids to remember and be attracted to. And I want you to please remember this little shot where you can see. Let me pause it if I can find it. So there's a little clip where you can see a doll of the raccoon being carried across. I want you to please try to remember this, because I'll reference this later on in the talk. Okay, so let's see if I have any more examples. Yeah, this is an example of leading heavily towards realistic, right? Like you look at the fur, you look at the anatomy, and you look at the size. It's all built to size. Whereas Paddington, the cartoon bear that we saw, was maybe as tall as this dining table that we see, right? So they've not played those games here. It's trying to be as close to real life as possible. But when you think about this performance that the bear is doing, which is sitting on a chair or a couch and having lunch with someone, this performance will simply not happen in real life. And like I said, photorealism is not just the way it looks, it's also the way it acts, the performance and the personality of the character. So this would still be considered stylized. And these distinctions are important, and this is what helps speed up your discovery process when you're making a film or when you're writing a film. And it'll be easier for the VFX guys to understand that, okay, I need a stylized bear which is leading towards photorealism. This is the first example they'll come up with. Or, I mean, this is the first style that will come up with, rather than, talking vaguely about the bear needs to do this, but also look real. Then, a lot of VFX guys can confuse, like, does he want Paddington or does he want something like this? Because both will do the same thing. Both will sit on a table and eat lunch. So yeah, let me see if there's any more examples. Okay, let's quickly go over. I won't spend a lot of time here because we might be running out of time. How the VFX team should be assisting you. So like I said, it's really beneficial for filmmakers and the VFX department if they are brought in at a very early stage. I would say even during the writing stage, if you can bring in your VFX guys and talk to them and have a conversation that this is what I'm expecting the character to do, and this is what I have in mind, and this is the goal of, like, this is the emotional goal of the film. So they might be able to make some suggestions which help you reach that goal faster visually. And the best part is they might be able to help you solve some problems before they occur, right? So if you're thinking about, let's say, a raccoon or a rabbit running through fog during dawn, right? So you have sharp rays of sunlight, you have fog, you have fur. This will be a very heavy and expensive shot. You might not think of this as an expensive shot because it's just a rabbit running through the fog, but the amount of simulations and calculations that you require to do this shot will greatly push your cost upwards. So if you're able to solve these issues and iron out these problems beforehand, not only do you spend less time on set, trying to figure out solutions, your post-production or your VFX production process is also faster because you already know what your goal is. And most of the VFX guys are very technical. They like to have very definitive answers in technical terms. some of them are very creative who can, talk to filmmakers as a storyteller, but those are far few and far between. And this creature business is also somewhat of a rare art. I just found out today through a colleague of mine that there are less than 1,000 creature artists in the world. So, and right now there's a huge demand for creature artists, and they're not able to fill them. So a lot of studios are collaborating by sharing artists to finish films with deadlines, because especially abroad, films with creatures are going up in number. And I hope that filmmakers in India has a very rich storytelling tradition with many unique animal characters which would benefit from being on the big screen. I hope they also are encouraged to take such risks and find someone they can work with and make a film that puts us on the map. And because there have been some Indian films with creatures, I will not name names, and the results have been unsatisfactory. But if the process is done right, if the discovery process has been done correctly, there's been enough time allotted for those shots to be produced, then I think good things can come out of that. So and okay, coming back to how the VFX team should be assisting you, one of the biggest problems that films with creatures have is whenever an actor touches a digital creature, there's a very big chance that the illusion will break. Because you see, anything you touch, if you put your finger on a table, it will cast some sort of a shadow, right? Anything you touch has some sort of a shadow. We call this contact shadow. And when you touch a digital creature, we expect there to be a shadow, but it's not very easy to calculate. So, and it's also not easy for actors to, wave their hand in midair, pretending that there is an animal here. So there are some solutions for it. So your VFX team should be prepared with those solutions, whether it's carrying a dummy object or whether it's, having your hand scanned to make sure that the movements of your hands can be replicated to do a shadow pass simulation. And like I said, while talking about the mechanical creatures, is that one of the biggest challenges is matching the light environment of the set. How many practical lights were used, how many studio lights were used, what is the sunlight, what is the angle of the light, intensity of the light, how was it cloudy, was it not cloudy, all these things. It's all about collecting data on set. And one complaint I hear from my peers who are VFX supervisors in India, that sometimes they are not given enough access to collect data. And if you are in a position where you are shooting a film with creature or any VFX, I think you are only benefiting yourself by letting them collect data, because they need this data to understand, analyze, and recreate the lighting. And without that, it will never look real. As simple as that. So they should be doing that. And what else? Give me a second. Okay, let's talk about some tricks for filmmakers that you can use to hide your tricks, right? Nobody wants their audience to know that you're using VFX. Nobody wants their audience to know that you're using a digital creature or a mechanical creature or whatever it may be. And I've made a very small list of tricks that I would like to share with you, but there's a lot more. So if this topic fascinates you, let's talk after this. We'll continue the conversation. I can talk about this for hours. Okay, so there is a concept we call the Uncanny Valley, which you may have heard about if you follow VFX or if you follow video games. It's when a digital character is almost real. almost looks real, almost feels real, but there is something off. There is, you can't, sometimes you might not be able to point out what it is, but you can feel it, that I know this is not natural, I know this is not real. And, this is something that the VFX community has been trying to solve for decades. But there are some, cheap tricks you can use to bypass it. And one of them is, let me see if I have a clip, is understanding the anatomy of the character you're using. I've picked up this clip to show you that this actor understands the anatomy of this chimpanzee. And if you notice, chimpanzees have a very hard eyebrow. Okay, so their eyebrows don't have much range of motion. It's almost like human elbow. It's just a bone with skin on top. There's almost no muscles or no fat tissue over there. So look at what this guy does with his performance. He almost doesn't move his eyebrows. He tries to keep it as stiff as possible. And again, when it goes to the VFX team, they have to clean up that data to make sure that it's stiffer than what the captured data is. But this is what good actors do. Like good actors, good filmmakers, they try to go a little bit deeper and understand what can we do to push this forward from my side, right? Obviously, the VFX guys will come in and put the bones and the muscles and the tissue and the fur and all those things. But the simple fact that this actor took the time to understand how chimpanzees' facial muscles work. So a lot of his performances, consolidated towards his mouth, because chimpanzees' mouths are more flexible than ours. Obviously, because it's larger and they have more muscles and more tissue over there. So, and it's also thinner skin, so it's easily movable. Okay, so this is one thing you can do. And like I said, photoreal is not just about the way it looks, it's also the way it acts, the way it reacts, and the way it moves, right? The performance is half the trick in the book. So if your performance is not right, you will land in the uncanny valley and people will be able to sense it that something is wrong. If you want to see an example of a film where they did a good job with the animal, but they did a poor job with the performance, there was a recent film called Call of the Wild. I wanted to pick up a clip of it, but I wasn't able to. It should be available on Hotstar or Disney Plus. It's a film about a dog that goes on an adventure, and it's a live action film. It's not an animation film. And the dog is fully CG, and some of the shots look good, but anytime there is a performance expected out of the dog, it becomes a Disney cartoon. It has big, beautiful eyes, and it has, a wonderful smile and all these things, which you don't see in a dog. The way dogs convey their emotions are very different. For example, half the dog's personalities come from the ears, right? Eyes and ears do more than the mouth. So things like that. So if you want to take a look at that, you might be able to notice that the CG work on that is fantastic, but the performance simply does not work. So on top of that, let me see. Okay, I've chosen this example for a reason. I would say, if you are on a tight budget, I would say choose very, very carefully which shots you compose in close-ups or even mid-shots. This shot in the film, if you've seen the film, a lot of people will agree, whether they are from a filmmaking background or not, that this shot feels more real than the rest of the film, right? There was a separate VFX studio hired just to do this shot. Their entire purpose on the film was to do this particular sequence. And if you take a screenshot from any other point in the film versus a screenshot from this particular scene, you will see that her skin is grainier, the paint has dried a little bit, she is sweating, and there's obviously tears in her eyes because of whatever's going on in the scene. So they've went above and beyond what is required for the film, because this is the only point in the film where a human and an alien or the Navi are in a close-up shot together. So the CG creature has to match up to the level of detail that a digital camera is picking up on the human. So yeah, so wherever you have a close-up shot, the amount of detail, we call it LODs, level of detail. So you can have different models or different level of details for different shots. For example, if this character was far away in a mountain, they would never use this particular model. They would use a lower resolution model with lower resolution textures and so on, because there is no way on earth, even on an IMAX screen, that you will see the pores of her skin, right? But in this shot, the camera is straight up in front of her face. So you want it to be as believable and as real as possible. So they went the distance to create pores on her skin, make it sweat, make the paint dry, have a tear, and the tear leaves a wet mark on the skin. So all these things, they need more artists, more VFX artists to complete, more time to render, and obviously the cost goes up. So even though this is, one of the biggest budget films of Hollywood, they chose very wisely that, if we are going to, spend a lot of money on a shot, it's going to be a close-up shot where the emotional impact is the highest. So, this is something a good VFX supervisor should be able to do for you. They should be able to help you guide that, this is the shot where we should spend more of our funds, and this is how we can do it. These are the things, these are the techniques we can use to elevate it and, make the shot look more believable and, have the impact land. Because the most important thing is that this emotional scene which is going on between the two characters, that has to hit the mark. That's the only goal. Realism or not doesn't matter. The only reason they do this is because if your character is not as real as the human character, the illusion will break. If the illusion breaks, you're not thinking about, their emotional connection or whatever is happening. You're thinking about, oh, she looks like VFX now. Finally, after 2 hours of film, I can tell that it's VFX, it's not real. Whereas when she's with other Navi, you don't have a point of reference of a human. So you believe that, okay, it is realistic, it's close to realistic, not completely real. So yeah, this is one thing I wanted to pick up about mid shots and close-ups, that be very careful and use them very wisely, because when it works brilliantly. But if you have many of them, you will be forced to make a concession where you will not be able to achieve those details, and your overall film will suffer. Okay. And okay, this is a shot I want to talk about really quickly. This is from the film Detective Pikachu. Please take a note of all the characters or all the animals that you're seeing, right? You might see a turtle, you might see a bird, and you might see many different animals. But if you look closely, there are many copies of the same animal. So this is something which is which filmmakers or films in general try to avoid. They want all the animals or all characters to look as unique as possible. So even in a war scene, right, there'll be when you have a lot of different creatures or a lot of different animals, we call them agents in our technical language. So the goal is to have as many unique agents as possible. So when you have a war scene with 5,000 characters, it's not 5,000 unique people, but it is maybe 25 unique people multiplied and scattered randomly. But this film was made on a tight budget, believe it or not. It's still considered a mid-budget film according to Hollywood standards. So they had the goal to introduce, the rich and vast library of characters Pokemon has, but at the same time, stay in budget and focus on the main characters as much as possible. So the characters that you see are copies of the one same model. There's only one agent per character. So this happens throughout the film. Next time you watch the film, you'll see that this bird, if you see another bird like it, it's the exact same model. It's not a new model. So that's one cost saving measure that they did. And I believe it works. For a film like this, it really works. I have not heard a single complaint from any of my filmmaker friends, or even, casual Pokemon friends. None of them have complained that, oh, they all look the same. The animation and the performance of all the characters are different enough that it distracts you. So this is one more trick you can do. See, all four of them are the exact same thing. It's just copies of each other. But the trick they're using is the performance of all four characters are different. Whereas in wars, the war scenes, you'll see every agent will have a very specific performance. So one will be slinging a sword, one will be protecting himself with a shield, and every corner you look, you'll see the same motion being replicated. So here what they did is they saved money on the model, and they made sure the performance was unique for every single character or every single model. So that said, I think we have reached the end. Let me see. Yes, so I think that's about it. I have a lot more to talk about, but again, we have limited time, so I try to best boil down to the essentials that I think you guys should know. If there are any questions, I will be very happy to answer them. And yeah, Baiju, do we have any questions?
Yeah, there is one question, which I can see typed here. How do you use a real animal to make a photorealistic animal?
How do we use a real animal to make
a photorealistic animal?
Okay, so the question is that they want to use an animal which already exists in the world. For example, a rabbit or a cat or a dog, something like that, right? Okay, so if you remember, I had the example of the orangutan. So in such a case, what they do is, if you have, let's say you have your own pet, right? You have your own dog whom you love very much, and you want this dog to be in your film and do some dangerous stunts. Obviously, you would never risk the life of your dog for the sake of a film. So you want to do it with VFX. The way it is done is, you have to use the images or the video of the dog as a reference, right? So even in the orangutan video, they chose a real life orangutan and tried to recreate it as closely as possible. They did not use their imagination to come up with an orangutan. There are enough orangutans in the world. So it's basically like a casting process. They went around zoos, they contacted people who work in habitats, and they looked up in the internet. When they found an orangutan which, looked like the kind of animal they wanted, they recreated that, as closely as possible. So that's something, you can do with a real animal. You have that advantage. That you have the real animal in front of you. You can keep taking pictures, you can keep taking videos, you can keep, taking close-ups of, the skin, the nails, and all these things, and recreate every single thing back into your model. So in fact, if you're using a real life model, it's often easier, or maybe not easier, it's often more convenient to recreate it because there's no lack of reference. Whereas if you want to have a dragon for your film, where do you go for reference? There is, nowhere to go. So what you end up doing for an animal like dragon is you end up borrowing parts from different types of animals. Like a dragon has a long neck, right? So you'll use the anatomy of a giraffe for that part. It has, leathery wings. So you use the anatomy of a bat for that. Then depending on whether it's a four-legged dragon, like How to Train Your Dragon, or if it's a two-legged dragon, like The Hobbit or Game of Thrones, you might use, a lion, or you might use horse. So there are different animals you can use and pick parts from, and basically Lego create a creature of your own. But again, if, like you said, if you have a real animal you want to recreate, your job will be much easier because you will always have the real animal to refer to. And also, if there's any mistakes in the performance, you'll be able to pick it up much more faster because you've seen the real animal move and behave and all these things. So it's much easier to pick up on when a movement or when a performance does not hit the right realism mark. Hopefully that answers your question. Baiju, are you here? Let me see if I can find any questions. I'm currently full screen, so I can't see any questions here because I'm full screen. So, and so while we're waiting for questions, if you allow me to talk a little bit about what we are doing. At my studio, we are building somewhat of a custom tool set or custom pipeline to deal with creatures. That will be somewhat unique and proprietary to us in that respect. And the whole idea of doing that is we're doing a slightly different approach to how creatures are made. Usually in VFX, it's all about, like, the end goal is realism, right? Like, it's all about how it looks from the outside, right? But if you look at the best creatures or the best performance of an animal, it will have very accurate movement under the skin. Like, the muscles will move a certain way, the bones will have some skin sliding around it, the fur will have certain reflection properties that you do not see in digital fur. So, that's something that I'm interested in. I'm interested in bringing, more scientific data, whether it's MRIs or whether it's talking to vet doctors or, consulting people who work in animal rescue centers about behaviors of these animals. So I'm interested in building the creature from the inside out, right, rather than outside in. That's the goal that we are trying to fulfill. And next time, if we do this, then hopefully we'll have some creatures which I can show you, which are released on the internet. Because right now, whatever we are doing is supposed to be confidential, so I don't have anything to show you publicly right now. Mr. Chavan, is Yash? Mr. Chavan, is Baiju here? Or if you guys have a question, just unmute your mic and unmute your webcam and we'll talk. Okay. I think there are no more questions. So,
hello.
Yes, hi.
Hi, Joshua here, sir.
Hey, hi Joshua. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I actually just had one question.
Okay.
The movie of Detective Pikachu.
Yes.
Would you consider that to be stylized or cartoon?
I would say it's stylized. It's stylized towards the direction of cartoony, right? So I made a little bar chart with one side is photorealism, one side is cartoony. So in stylized, you can go towards either direction. And the only reason I'm calling it stylized and not cartoony is because all the animals have a lot of properties from real animals. For example, the skin is very leather-like, or the fur they use represents a certain kind of animal. Like the fur they use on Pikachu is actually designed based on mouse fur, because apparently, Pikachu is supposed to be somewhat of a mouse character related, right? So they tried to recreate that, picked up a reference from a baby mouse who has very soft fur, and so I would say it is stylized, because if you look at, I think there are some video games of Pokemon which are in 3D, which don't use realistic properties of skin or nails and fur and all these things. It's very, toy-like characteristic. So
Yes, yes.
those are definitely more cartoony. But
All
yeah.
right. Okay.
Is there anything else you wanted to ask?
Yeah, actually, one more thing is there about
Okay.
the photorealistic animals.
Yeah.
So when you said about the dog thing, like what is the main reference point you would need a real animal to create a photorealistic animal? Would it be movement or fur, or is there anything more than that? And how will
Mm,
a real animal, like if I didn't have a real animal, what would be the time consuming parts in recreating it photorealistically?
okay. So when you're doing photorealism,
Hmm.
there is no limit as to how much reference you need. The more you have, the more you understand this animal better, and your decision making throughout the film, because you'll have hundreds of shots with this character, and every single shot will be a different performance.
All right.
So during that period of production, you should be able to understand whether this sort of movement or this sort of look is natural for this character or not. Whether, this particular dog, if I put him under, a cloudy, dark, rainy environment, whether his fur will look the same or not. Luckily, if you have a dog, you can just take pictures of the dog when you are giving it a bath, and you'll have reference for how the dog looks when it's wet. But if you don't have, let's say you're doing a fantasy character, which is not a dog, maybe a dragon or something like that, then you have to refer to the closest relative.
Okay.
That's the only solution we have.
So if you're talking about
So
a werewolf or something, a monster that way, then what would the animal be? A
which
wolf.
animal did you
A,
say?
a werewolf, like a werewolf.
So werewolf is mostly human, right? It's, I believe, neck down, it's a human, and
Yeah.
above, or is it waist down, it's a human? How is it?
I know it's covered in fur and it stands like a human does.
Okay. So its movements will be based on a biped character, which is a human or any other creature you can find which stands on two legs, right? And the rest of the reference, obviously, you'll have to take from a wolf. So yeah.
Yeah, that's it for my question.
Okay.
Vivek, I can see
Yes,
more
ma'am.
questions. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I can. I'm here.
So there is one. Can we get little more detail on stylized animal, which you have already talked about
Yeah.
while answering to
Yeah.
Joshua's question.
Yeah.
There is another question. Can you elaborate on the anchor points used when reading facial expressions on human face?
Oh, okay. That's a very good question. Okay. So let me just refer to the stylized thing really quickly, and then we'll move on to the next question. So, I mean, I don't blame you for being confused with the stylized thing. This is something that a lot of VFX guys also struggle with. A lot of, designers also struggle with. So, maybe this is your first or second or third, experience with dealing with or categorizing stylized animals. So I can understand, but think about it this way. Um, Photoreal is an absolute, right? There is no second question what is photoreal and what is not. Anyone can point out, okay, this is photoreal. I believe that this animal was really there. And there is cartoony. Cartoony, obviously, that it is nowhere near real. It's trying to be as cute as possible, as fun as possible, as expressive personality as possible. Somewhere between these things, you have a stylized. Sometimes it will be more cartoony, like Joshua brought up the example of Pokemon. So Pokemon, obviously, the franchise is based on a cartoon, so it has to maintain those limitations of a cartoon. And sometimes it will be more realistic. For example, there are some ads with animals who talk, right? Like the Geico gecko. Maybe if you've seen it, it's a realistic looking, gecko with big beady eyes, and he's trying to sell you insurance. So the only unrealistic part about this character is if it has big eyes and it is talking to you. So that is more towards realism. If you guys remember Sonic, there was a film called Sonic which came out, which had a very difficult production because the audience simply rejected the design. They had a stylized version of Sonic. And from what I have heard on the inside is that the director wanted the cartoon to look like a boy. So if you look at the proportions of the old Sonic trailer, it's the proportion of a 8 to 10-year-old boy. That's the way he was thinking. But when they redesigned the character, they tried to push it towards cartoony, tried to stay as close to the original cartoon design as possible, and that obviously people loved very much. But the content, like, you know, the way the personality and all these things that were designed for the character apparently did not change. So the only thing they changed was, you know, the look of it. There were some reshoots, but mostly like the scenes and the dialogues and all these things were constant. So that's one example. If you want to see a variation of what Stylized can be towards a slightly more realistic and slightly more cartoony, that is a good example. Compare the old trailer of Sonic and the new trailer of Sonic, and you'll find out. And coming to this question of, you know, what are the anchor points of a facial performance? That's a good question. That's a technical question, and that is something which we can discuss for a very long time. But to sum it up as closely as possible, if you look at any face, right, there is a natural triangle that forms with the corners of our features. For example, the tips of your eyebrows, left and right, right? So those are your two corners, and then your chin. So anything in this region is where your facial performance happens, okay? And anything outside of it is considered is a part of your facial structure, okay? So obviously when you're designing the character, the facial structure comes to play, but when you're doing the performance, you're solely focusing on the triangle area. And I come from a character animation background. So when I was in college, I spent a lot of time doing character animation, performances, all these things. And one thing that I learned was that if your eyes have the correct performance, your lip sync is forgivable. This is something that, you know, took me some time to really digest, because we assume that if the lip sync is off, it will feel like the audio is disconnected. But turns out people pay more attention to the eyes. So, you know, even if, let's say, you forget about the triangle and you only focus on your eye mask region, if you can get a believable performance, if the emotions of the character ring true on screen, your lip sync can be off by a few frames and people will forgive it. Hopefully, does that answer your question? If you want me to elaborate on something, I'm happy to. Baiju? Baiju, are you there?
Yeah, 1 second, Vivek. And I just check, and I'm not seeing more questions in the chat box. And,
okay.
Okay. So that's what is the scene, sir. Amit sir? Amit sir?
Yeah, Baiju, is it fine now?
Yeah, is it fine? Yeah.
In the session? Yeah.
Yeah.
No
maybe
more questions, right?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'm not seeing any more questions in the box. Maybe Amit sir can conclude it.
Yeah, I couldn't see him there.
Amit sir is there. Amit sir is there. The mic is.
Yes,
sir.
Yeah.
Okay.
Close.
Okay, so before we end, I would just like to thank you guys once again for being here. Thank you for coming, and you know, I'm really grateful for your time and your attention that you've taken to come to attend this seminar. And you know, again, like I said, I live and breathe for this kind of stuff. I love creatures, I love animals, and you know, it's combining two passions in my life for me. So if you want to talk about this more, that's my email, vsuvarna@lakadif.co. You know, you can reach out to me. Everyone's, you know, very welcome. If you want to discuss more about the technology, or if you just have some ideas about films that you're not sure how to do, I'm always happy to discuss these things. It's fun for me, so I really enjoy it.
Thank you, Vivek.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vivek. Thank you, Baiju. It was a great session. And thank you for elaborating on the basics of CG animation and the connotation on cartoony, stylized, and photorealistic animation. I hope you do come for future workshops. And as Baiju said, we can have some more webinars where during the session of when the semester starts, we can have, larger sessions where you can discuss in detail. It was a wonderful session, and I hope all the students have enjoyed it. To the students, I would say that our semester starts on 1st of September, and those who have not, completed their provisional admission, please do so by paying your fees at the earliest, and so that you can start attending our classes from 1st of September. Either it will be online or some of it will be on campus. So do get back to us as soon as possible.
Thank you, Vivek.
Thank you so much. Thank you
thank
for
you.
inviting me. The pleasure was mine. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, Amit sir, you can end. You've got the authority to end the session.
Nothing to add. You have said everything there is to say. I can just say, on behalf of SFT, thank you very much for attending, and thank you once again, Vivek and Baiju, for organizing this, and dear Yashwantrao for being a generous host. Thank you once again, and let's call it a day.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, sir.